we were preparing ourselves to occupy this space, I believe this is a death session for the evening. The previous session seems to be much more interesting. We'll still put in our best efforts to make sure that all those who are here with us are able to get some insights of what we are delivering, what we are doing in our lives as professionals. And there should be some takeaway for you as well because you are spending time with us. In the next 45 minutes or so that we would be talking to you, interacting with each other, we'll try to bring a little bit of understanding around environment, social, and governance to the extent we know this particular subject. In terms of the coinage of term ESG, it is not new. Well, majority of the people will believe that it is the last 3 or 4 years that you have started hearing about ESG. The term was coined way back in 2004-5. But that was also the time when Kyoto Protocol was being signed off by or ratified by Russia, and there was money lying on the table. And majority of the markets, whether it is developed countries or developing countries, they picked up that as the first opportunity and started looking at how we can do the transactions of emission reduction across geographies. Somewhere between 2007 to 2009, essentially during the US subprime crisis, was when the investment community, basically the PEs, they picked up environment, social, and governance as one of the additional line items on which they wanted to have some insights before going ahead with the investment. So financial due diligence, tax due diligence, legal due diligence, and you had the environment, social, and governance due diligence introduced to the larger community. So I believe the first take on ESG has come from the investors community, and then it kind of percolated into taking a moonshot on the strategy part of it, and taking decisions around decarbonization, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, on improvement of the overall governance of the organization, and then how it has cascaded into the regulatory ecosystem. So if we look at India per se, we had the first instance of introduction of corporate social responsibility as a mandatory spend. And I believe majority of the people, those who are present here today, they are all because of this one key interest that has come onto the horizon because of the change in the regulations. So essentially the section 135 of the Companies Act was the trigger for majority of us. We moved into BRR, Business Responsibility Report. That was more of a nudge which was created by regulators so that the non-financial disclosures beyond the social aspects get introduced into the ecosystem of businesses. And then beyond that, we have seen the developments around how ranking and rating agencies started playing their role. How, say, for example, the assurance bit is now getting introduced through BRSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. So beyond the disclosures, assurance requirements are also kicking into the overall ecosystem. So from next year itself, the year which is going to get over on 31st of March 2024, top 150 listed companies from India will provide a reasonable assurance. So the same amount of rigor that you provide on the financial due diligence or financial assurance is required to be provided for the non-financial items also. So that is the way in which we have evolved. And if we look at India per se, the last decade of development around environment, social, and governance is more or less at par with what is happening globally. We may be falling short by a year or two, but the difference is not much. Whatever is happening in the Western world, we are looking at similar kind of opportunities arising in India. So even beyond the social aspect of the business, there will be a lot of opportunities for younger lot to look at the environmental bit, because that is going to be the largest challenge. We are looking at the revival of carbon markets in different geographies in different forms under the Paris Agreement. So what I am planning to do with the colleagues that I have on the dais, look at what is happening with respect to all these aspects, say for example from Gazala, coming from L&T Finance, from Sumana in terms of the Bank of America's understanding, and then Bala from the Cognizant's perspective. So let me start with Gazala and get her views in terms of what is happening with respect to the companies, those who are into the finance business. Are there new products which are being launched in the market? Are there inclusivity which is happening not just within the organization but outside of the organization? So what are the new things which are coming up on the horizon and how they are making a much better world for all of us? Gazala.
So before I get onto the subject of ESG, I would like to share that I think most of us here would know that how the sector has evolved. The development sector, we've seen different variations of it and different diversities in terms of philanthropy. Then we started asking questions about empowerment. We've been asking that for very long. We've also seen a movement towards CSR, and that's how most of us in the development sector then move to asking corporates for funds. But it's very important for us, and especially the development sector professionals, to know why ESG is important, because this is the next drift or something that is already happening. And that is how it is going to affect the landscape of, or rather affect and maybe positively affect changes in the landscape of development sector across, and especially in India, because Inderjeet just pointed out that there are so many compliances and regulatory requirements that have come in, and fairly so. So I think it's from that angle that I would like you to view it. Well, to introduce myself, I'm Gazala and I head ESG for L&T Finance. We are a NBFC, a non-banking financial organization, and we offer loans. That's what we do. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to remind all of us that all kind of economy, all kind of products came in because we wanted to serve the humanity or serve the human race. And I think that's pertinent. So when you remove the human element from business, the products are supposed to be for people, while they are supposed to generate capital, but they're supposed to be for people, right? So, the means and the end has to be justified. And I think this whole transition and the focus that is coming to the means, rather than the end, is very interesting. And if you look at L&T Finance, I think L&T otherwise also is very well known for its governance practices. One of the things that we did as part of ESG, in 2021, we enhanced the scope of our CSR committee to CSR and ESG committee. That's something that we did. In 2022, L&T Finance revised its business strategy, and we've included as part of Lakshya, it's called Lakshya, and we've integrated sustainability as one of the core pillars of business. So I think that critically highlights that how important all these elements are in terms of not only sustainable business, but a sustainable business for a sustainable society. And the third element that I wanted to speak in terms of governance is what we also do is we evaluate our board on ESG parameters, how they are delivering value to all the customers and the entire stakeholders, through the businesses that we run. So I'll limit myself to that for now.
Thank you very much, Gazala. Well, when I look at Bank of America, the way it has kind of carried out its operations across the globe, the investment in Life Insurance Corporation, and multiple other important assets in various geographies, one of the things that comes to my mind is that when you talk about environment, social, and governance from the point of view of investment, because what is happening is that if you take equity or quasi-equity positions in any of the companies, you are required to talk about financed emissions in your public disclosures. So let me just go towards Sumana now to get some understanding about how they have identified various goals and targets for environment, social, and governance, how they are looking at carbon neutrality at a larger scale for the Bank of America, and a couple of other thoughts that she would like to share. Sumana.
Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. So happy to be with people who at 6 in the evening, I did a back of the envelope. There's about 15 into 3 times, so I think we have about 150 people in the room. Quick pulse check. Anybody here with the title ESG in their day jobs? Fantastic. All right. So if we were having this conversation about 6 years ago, I think that this number of hands that went up now would be far smaller. So as a large global banking institution that Bank of America is, I of course will restrict my whatever I say today within the confines of the entity that I now represent in India, which happens to be the Global Capability Center for Bank of America, which means that through technology and operations, we serve the 8 lines of business of Bank of America globally, based out of India, with about 29,000 good folks across 5 locations. So as Inderjeet so kindly introduced in the beginning, that there are a few stellar goals and achievements that the global entity is known for. Not least of all is the fact that our 1.5 trillion US dollar commitment through our environmental business initiatives goes into climate financing. About 14 billion US dollars have been committed already. And the more famous legendary achievement of how in 2019, 1 year ahead of target, Bank of America became carbon neutral, also 100% renewable energy. So for any bank or financing institution, there is, of course, our footprint is smaller in terms of our own operations, and then much larger in terms of what is the financed emissions, meaning clients who are financed by the banking institution, what is their footprint look like. And therefore, when you move the needle on their carbon neutrality or making them greener or moving towards a net zero, which for us globally is a target for 2050, the journey starts from our own operations and what we commit to. But of course, it extends to pretty concrete things like, will you take on targets for the most or the highest emitters first, which is what was done a couple of years ago by selecting 3 such sectors, automobile and energy being 2 of them, and then more to come. But these are a few, global headlines, all very 30,000 feet. Talking about what is it that we do through the GCC itself in India. As with most other such global capability centers, we mirror the overall ESG strategy or roadmap. And since an essential element that my friend Gazala spoke about is also people, one disclaimer, and my favorite one in the context of this ESG and CSR, is that the S in ESG is not CSR. And perhaps the informed audience in this room is well aware. So then what is the people element really? It could be things like raising the bar on minimum hourly wages, as Bank of America has done. It's now $25 per hour, and that's quite a stellar achievement, and one that's come through years of the leadership supporting such a thing. It is done in the people element in ESG is also in the form of responsible sourcing, meaning not just of goods and services, but in terms of the vendors that you choose across your supply chain with any global company that's of important consideration. And of course, bringing it closer to home is the fact that do you invest in the communities in which you operate. For us, we have the rare luxury as a capability center in India operating out of 5 locations, to do that investment in and around the locations in which we operate through what we call actions for workforce development, meaning a bunch of skilling initiatives, all implemented by credible non-for-profits. Many of you may be in the room or in the summit today and tomorrow. And we are grateful to have those partnerships that make the people element of why ESG is important and real for us on an everyday basis come to life. So I'll stop here. I'm not, the world's best carbon expert. I was not the one who, we follow what is our roadmap in terms of reducing our own emissions. We look at greening our operations, not just with green building certifications, but with how we operate and what are the possibilities. Small deltas go on to make a big difference in terms of day-to-day, whether it's going print-free as far as possible. I think the Bank of America debit card is one that has been in the news for coming up with the plastic-free way of debit card. Then there are several others such as that within our own premises. As with, I think, similar to what several other IT majors would have done in the context of their own operations, to be conscious of electricity, water, wastage, because as a GCC, we are not producing anything, we are not extracting anything. It's really a large number of people operating with lots of data, gigabytes. So those are our two biggest areas to make a difference and move the needle. But I think I'll stop here with an overall context of how is it that we look at ESG overall, and where is it that it comes close to home and becomes real. And within that, a lot of partnerships. Perhaps we've only touched the surface so far, but there is tremendous opportunity to both look at technology, to look at service providers who are using technology to both track, reduce, monitor emissions, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Sumana. So if you look at the dais right now, we are all from the white-collar organizations. None of us is into real manufacturing, but if, say, for example, let's assume Cognizant is present on the dais, we see all these green campuses. We see everything looking nice and clean if you walk into these campuses. But when we talk about ESG, is it a cakewalk for them, or is it something wherein they also feel that there are challenges which are required to be overcome? So maybe let's just hear it from Bala in terms of how their ESG journey started globally, what are some of the cross-geographical challenges that they have overcome, and how they look at the future when it comes to the requirements of environment, social, and governance. Bala?
Thank you, Inderjeet. Good evening, all. I hope I'm audible and clear. So, good evening. A little bit wake-up call. So, thanks once again for CSRBOX for giving this opportunity and sitting next to the esteemed panelists. I'd like to start a little bit of history, right? Like back in 1994, I don't know how many of you have heard about John Elkington. He's the person who coined the frame triple bottom line. So 1994, he said like people, planet and profit, all three has to go hand in hand for the earth to survive, the business to flourish, and all of us to keep progressing and save the earth as well. But first time in the world, in the history, we have heard recalling of manufacturing components, right? Like a car component could have been recalled. An automotive sector, like there could be recall. First time, a management principle was recalled by the founder, John Elkington. 20 years later, after 1994, 2018, he came out in public and he said, I'm recalling triple bottom line. This concept is not working. People are just using placebo effect. CEOs and executive leadership team can move heaven or earth to make profit and not for people and planet. I'm recalling this management fact, and he recalled it. But things have changed. Things have changed from 2017. Now, there are multiple surveys that says 80% of the investors, the big like institutional investors, to small investors like BlackRock, Vanguard, all of them, they say, I want to invest my money in a responsible company. Do they have metrics that measure the triple bottom line? 80% and above employees say that I want to be part of a purposeful organization. 78% of the customers are asking that, am I working with a supplier who is doing responsible business? And regulatory is coming in force. Like Inderjeet said, like BRSR in India, and the SASB and TCFD standards across the globe, GRI standards have come. And now investors are asking, customers are asking, employees are asking. You don't have a choice. ESG is no more a nice to have, it's a must to have. So John Elkington might be thinking that he should put back the triple bottom line. At least he'll be happy that now things are coming in place, right? So given that we being a multinational company and a software service company, we have that same amount of like push from our customers. Every RFP that we get from our customers, there is a segment that asks for, what is your net zero goal? What is your DNI? What is your community giving? Do you have a data privacy policy? Do you have a whistleblower policy? So customers are pushing, investors are pushing, employees are asking for it. We don't have a choice. So we have started publishing our ESG report for the past few years. It's out there, you can all see. But in short, right, like what we do, E is nothing but air, water, land, and waste management. So how a company pollutes the air, how they conserve water, or like how can they measure carbon accounting and that pollute. So we have published a net zero goal in terms of ESG. E as an E. So by 2030, we'll be reducing around like 40 to 50% of the carbon emissions. By 2040, we'll be reducing our carbon emissions by 90%, and rest of them will be offsetted. And water conservation, we are doing all that necessary. Like I come from Coimbatore. Coimbatore has not a lot of them know that Coimbatore has Cognizant office. We have 17,000 employees at Cognizant, Coimbatore alone. So it is actually a zero discharge water office. So we treat all water and we consume the water. We don't discharge any water outside. So we have taken all necessary steps in terms of environment. E-waste disposal is something that I want to probably touch upon later in the next segment. And S is more about like whom you hire, whom you take care, how you take care of them, health and safety of your employees, and diversity and inclusion, and who is your supplier, are they taken care? So all of this comes under S. And inside that, community giving is a component under S, and inside that community giving is where CSR, philanthropy, employee volunteering comes. So ESG is a superset of CSR, that if you have to give some context. And we have a fantastic community giving program. We have Cognizant Foundation. We won an award today morning for an initiative. And I head the Cognizant Employee Volunteering Program for India. So we have around like 50,000 employees volunteer every year, investing around 150,000 hours of volunteering. And we also do a lot of philanthropic activities. Under G, the last segment is about governance, auditing, data privacy, whistleblower policy, ethics and compliance. So we have very, very, very strict policies established and no compromise, zero compromise policies that has been established in Cognizant. So for more details, our ESG report is published and all of you can have a look at it. I thought I'll give a glimpse about like what's this all about. So I hope it helps. Back to Inder.
Thank you very much, Bala. Well, essentially, when we talk about, say, for example, the disclosure ecosystem and the basic requirements which are stipulated or presented in BRSR, majority of the companies, when they are making public disclosures, let's say, for example, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, they will say that, okay, I have a male population of 90% and a female population of 10%. Now, with the BRSR core requirement, it further goes deeper into the disclosures, wherein it says, can you talk about the distribution of your salary corpus with respect to males versus females? And that is where the responses are right on the face, that even after a very skewed male is to female ratio, the salary distribution is further skewed. So you will not see 90:10 when it comes to salaries. It will go down to 93:7, 92:8, or something like that. So this is one critical issue with which organizations are trying to find a solution or a way out. But when we look at, say, for example, financial institutions in terms of the products that they have developed, in terms of the concepts around inclusivity, a larger participation of women community in the products that they have developed, I believe that is equally important. So you just look inbound and you should also look outside of your four walls in terms of how your products are delivering on the inclusivity aspect of the business. And that's where, again, I would like to go back to Gazala to get some kind of understanding as to how they are looking at the markets, how they are redefining or recalibrating their products, and how it is becoming much more inclusive as compared to how it was in past. Gazala, please.
Thank you. So to talk about the loans that we provide and largely focusing on the diversity and inclusion part, we have a segment called the rural business loans. And here, all 100%, we have a loan category called microfinance. And here, we have rolled out loans to about 60 lakh women, currently 63 lakh women, and this is only for women. And these are for women micro-entrepreneurs. So this is a product that we have for women when you look at from the gender perspective. Also, we serve 42 aspirational districts, and about the kind of business that we do as part of our rural portfolio, 51% is in low-income states. Another thing that I would like to highlight is through our business, we are also able to get into the fold of financial inclusion about 6 lakh women, which is 10% of our rural business, to women who are new to credit. And I think, for us, we may have a scenario where we get calls, for credit cards, and we get interrupted and we get, irritated with those. But imagine, you are in a rural sector, and you are reaching out to banks, but you don't have a credit score, you've never taken a loan, and therefore nobody is willing to give you a loan. And that's where microfinance institutions and NBFCs like us, we offer the first loan, which is of course higher risk and of course a little higher interest as well. But this is the one thing that we do to roll out to people who do not have access to finance. So that's something that we do in terms of inclusion. That's where the product piece would be.
No, this is indeed interesting that new products are practically being developed to bring in inclusivity in the society. We all hear all these idealistic statements that we need to move from profit to purpose, we need from, in terms of our movement from shareholders to stakeholders, though we very clearly understand that the business of business is business. We cannot let go of this basic fundamental requirement unless we move into a society wherein we believe that everybody is at par. But if you believe in those particular understandings, then you cannot grow. For a country like India, which is practically growing anywhere between 6.5 to 7% year on year, we are one of the largest growing economy. And in such kind of scenario, when we have these concepts on which we need to deliberate, we need to take decisions, even to an extent wherein we might let go of some of our businesses. So say, for example, if we look at the World Bank, through IFC, they have decided right in the year 2013 that we will not fund any thermal power plant. So this is on the cost of business, even if the rate of interest is lower, which is being offered by IFC to developing countries. This one decision has curtailed both the opportunities for them as well as the opportunity for the developing countries or underdeveloped countries to grow. So keeping these two basic statements in mind, maybe if I can again go back to Sumana and get a little bit of advice, guidance on how a larger conglomerate or a bank like Bank of America is looking at this particular transition of moving from profit to purpose or from shareholder to stakeholders.
$1 million question, Inder. Within the sustainability and let's say the fraternity that works on social responsibility, it is no secret that the financial services institutions have the least amount of trust and goodwill when it comes to what is overall your reputation in doing anything that is not profitable, since the number and the profit lens continues and will always continue to remain primary. But obviously it is a journey, the same for us as for our other peer groups, and as our friend Bala so kindly pointed out, that this is, we are calling it a narrative, but it's an imperative. Because businesses don't exist in vacuum, they exist for stakeholders, which includes customers, employees, and shareholders. It would be a overkill sitting where we are in 2023 with what one has heard about the debates in the US in both houses, as well as some of the policy decisions that have been taken when it comes to ESG ratings of companies, as well as the debates among those who rate, which are interesting twofold or in a many-fold way. So it would be an overkill to say that we've moved from shareholder to stakeholder capitalism. I mean, it's a journey. We may or may not ever get there, with fathers who coined triple bottom line wanting to recall that concept. But there are a few things that the bank does. I'm not a spokesperson for Bank of America. I represent the Global Capability Center in India. But within that, it is safe to say that I think our focus, wherever in the world we operate, on honestly investing in communities towards advancing economic mobility for those who have been historically marginalized. What does that mean? It sounds like a fancy corporate cliche, but what it really means in the context of, let's say, a country like India, which is diverse, is that there is an angle of gender, poverty, and within that further nuances. So when we select mentees for skill development programs, or when we select candidates who will then be mentored by our teammates, meaning any of our colleagues, and that is a substantial number, because about 100,000 hours year on year, or at least as recently as last year, gets volunteered towards some of those skill development type of mentorship by our own teammates. It's purely voluntary in nature. So the choice of who you will reach out to is one where there is an important lens of inclusion used. Also in terms of we may have a global target and a roadmap for net zero and certain commitments, but within the community investments also in India, we have for the last 2 years proactively looked at environment as a theme, which was earlier not the case. We may have been investing in education and skill development alone. So when we talk of environment, of course, within the ambit of what it is that we invest in, it is a combination of urban afforestation, water body restoration, cleanups, as well as solid waste management, a few circular economy models where waste is collected. Once again, beneficiaries or trainees are women who then segregate and then make it into something that's eco-friendly and then distributed. So I would say that the lens of, or rather the lens that you apply for selection of who is it that you would include, and that being aligned to the overall remit of responsible growth, is how we look at living our purpose wherever we conduct business.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Take over for a minute. Inderjeet, I actually don't see that, a purposeful and driven, organization. It is not loss of profit, because when you, and I'm bringing in the sustainable finance here, we have a loan with IFC. We did about 585 crore sustainability linked loans and social focused loans, where the lender, for forward lending, they've given us money, of course, because we are putting it in sectors that are going to benefit, again, ESG aligned, and therefore I think it's a win-win for NBFCs like us, for the communities we serve, and our customers, all of them.
Right. It does make sense. Well, Bala, when we talk about the requirements of public disclosures, and from the point of view of, say, for example, a large IT sector player, extended producer responsibility across multiple sectors is gaining a lot of relevance. CPCB is coming up with new requirements with new sectors. I believe the recent one is tires that has been introduced. So from the point of view of, say, for example, Cognizant, and if you can talk about multiple other players in the same space, how do you look at e-waste, how easy or how difficult it is in terms of the management of e-waste, and what is the overall vision around, say, for example, managing your affairs through in-house hardware, looking at cloud computing, and multiple other opportunities which are available to you. So what's the current status now, and how you are looking at the future around e-waste?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So, most of you might be knowing, right? Like Cognizant being, one of the largest tech services company, we have 350,000 employees across the globe and 250,000 in India. And e-waste is definitely a problem. It's a phase, right? Like when you procure a thing like plan, procure, deploy, and dispose. So that's the phases of any device for an IT industry, right? So we plan, and when we procure, we ensure that we have the right supplier in place who can produce and give us energy efficient, and who can measure carbon accounting when he manufactures it and produces it. So all of that, like scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 comes in. And then deploy, and then disposal is where the question points to. It's definitely a challenge. We have vendors whom we have identified who take care of the disposal as per the policy. But I want to share one best practice that we adopted, especially during COVID. March 17, 2020, when the national lockdown was announced, all of us in the IT industry had to pick up our laptop and desktops back to home. And then we started to resume our work from the desktops at connecting from home. But the people who had desktops had a challenge of power fluctuations, so we had to provide UPS also. So UPS was supplied to them. And we also felt there was a little bit of a vulnerability in terms of Wi-Fi access in a desktop. So we had to replace all desktops with laptops. And within 6 months of the lockdown, our offices were filled with desktops that we replaced. There was a huge problem in terms of real estate. It was a lockdown anyway, nobody's coming to office. But it was huge, bulk of desktops lying inside our office. So At the same time, through our community giving program like outreach volunteering, we were doing online teaching for school children and teachers how to continue education while you are at home. So that's when we realized that millions of students are still deprived of education during lockdown because of access to device, access to internet connectivity. So we went to our leadership team with a proposal saying that hey, typically this goes to e-waste. Why don't you give it for a cause? Because these devices definitely had 5 years plus more life on it. So fortunately, we were able to sell that idea. Management had a buy-in, and we have donated, as we speak today, since 2020, we have donated around 60,000 desktops for cause for the school education system across India. And the impact of that, right? It's not an hardware that we moved from our office to a school or an ecosystem, right? At Karnataka, okay, yeah, thank you so much. 10 minutes time, so I have to leave for Q&A as well. So I'll take 1 minute and then I'll wrap it up. So at Karnataka, we signed an MOU with Department of Collegiate Education. We said like we'll donate 12,500 computers for them. And there was a beautiful team from the government and Rotary in Karnataka partnership with us. And then all the 12,500 computers were deployed in around like 150 to 200 colleges. And this year, the colleges who received the desktops from Cognizant has announced admissions for Bachelor of Computer Education for the first time. So they have set up a lab and a course is being introduced because of this donation. And this also benefits your CSR. So there is a market value MRP rate for that, for the desktops that is being donated, and you can also claim it in your CSR. So it is a multi-purpose benefit that we saw, and it was path breaking. I see like when I go to the tribal places, I see computers from Cognizant. They're so thankful, and we continue to do that as a policy. We are establishing that 50% of our devices that we are going to plan to dispose, they are in good condition, they have life. We thought we will give it for donations. So that's
brilliant.
something that I thought I'll share as a best practice.
Repurposing any of the products that you are currently using in your business for other purposes is always a wise idea. Well, we have about 8 minutes at hand. As the clock is ticking, can we open it up for the floor?
Yep.
Yeah. So if somebody can help colleagues with mics.
Should we circulate a mic over there?
Just identify yourself and tell us to whom you would like to ask the question.
They have got people who have got mic.
Hey, I'm Karan, founder of Breathe ESG. We're an ESG tech company. But actually I have two questions, one directed on the finance side and one for Sir. So the first question on terms of the finance side is you spoke about sort of giving out $585 million worth of SLLs, right? But with about $2 trillion worth of SLLs outstanding by end of this year, right? Do you think that there's enough, this instrument's being used enough in India, and how is the adoption as well as awareness sort of working out? Because companies, I don't think, are really aware of the instruments that they can use through ESG for their financing, right? And so for you, the question sort of stems from the triple bottom line, right? You spoke very extensively about how asset managers like your Blackstone and BlackRock, right, are making active efforts in prioritizing ESG. And I agree with that, but just to play devil's advocate, right, don't you feel that a lot of this intervention from asset managers is to inflate the value of existing assets? For example, assets now put into the REIT, right, which have LEED Platinum certifications, are able to generate about 9 to 10% higher rental premiums, right? So when it goes from the asset owner to an asset manager, right, they're able to basically get much better returns because it's sustainable in nature.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. The kind of sustainable finance that we can take up in India, we haven't done as much as we could. Rather, if you look at the global figures, we've gone, 2023 is lesser than 2022. And there are quite many other challenges related to it. So if you look at how investors, the sensitivity of investors being prepared to invest in ESG funds, or in organizations, you will see that the European market seems to be more maturer. They're putting in more funds. You of course have heard about, Sumana also mentioned about the US, the dichotomy that's happening in terms of shareholders, advocacy against ESG. And there are many things to it, especially people will understand that when we take on funds from international quarters, there's something called as hedging, and because of which the cost of the fund becomes very high in India. So therefore, it's not sustainable for the Indian entity to take it and deploy. So yes, there is a need for dialogue, and therefore, sustainable finance is an area of advocacy. I completely agree with that.
And to your question on the institutional investors pushing it, and it could be a lobbying, is what we look at it, right? I see that's a good problem to have, as long as the people and planet is being saved, right? Let the profit also happen, but as long as we could continue to, I don't see that as a big time impact, because these two, planet and people, were completely ignored. Now that there is a push and must to have KPIs have established, and people are really, making focused efforts to make a difference. So as long as that happens, right, that will also get solved, or that will get saturated to a point. That's what I see as a point. So it's a good problem to have.
Perfect. Thank you. I believe the gentleman in the second row,
Sir,
you wanted.
may I please? I think they have already distributed the slaughter, so it is my turn.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
DNI.
So anyways, good evening, everyone, and to the dignitaries.
Just
on the
keep it
dais.
simple and short, please.
Yeah. So I again have two questions, maybe to Ms. Sumana directly. So you're talking about climate finance. One thing, that is climate finance only limited to the investments provided for the installation of renewable energy, or are there some other projects you can uh, fill in the category of climate finance? And if, can you give me some examples, and how do you measure the impact of these, finance ultimately, what they're resulting into? And the second question again to you is about this ESG rating. So while you're saying that, you are investing sustainably in a sustainable business, so you must be, checking out the ESG rating of those companies. So these ESG ratings, are you looking for only the authorized, ESG raters, or the board of directors which approve the sustainability report? Do you take that into account also?
Well, I'll start by saying that I'm not qualified to answer your second question, because I don't, deal with it as part of my role or responsibility here. But in terms of climate finance, the commitments, the bigger commitments are obviously at the top of the house, but in terms of what kind of projects that get taken up, let's say, as through the community investment part, it is mostly, as I mentioned, either urban water body restorations, afforestation in urban, peri-urban areas, or creation of structures which will then aid better solid waste management, and therefore reduce emissions. I think the other kind of upcoming area, both internally and in terms of some of the investments, is really the electric vehicle space. Again, I know that it's fraught with controversy, that there is, within the building of electric vehicles, it's not really all good and clean. There is, but with today's day is not for addressing those topics. Those debates remain, because the world is not black and white. There are several grays. Yeah, I believe my colleagues who work on both responding to queries as well as with rating agencies directly would have a view on which are the ones that we are using for our clients. But like I said, that's not part of my role here. But thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. I have a very direct question. The answer is not simple. It's for the whole panel, including Inderjeet sir. So there was some talk about BRSR and BRSR core, right? One of the main aspects that the updated BRSR core has introduced is actually reporting of the value chain, meaning 75% of your value chain, both upstream and downstream, you have to give visibility into their metrics. So I actually wanted to understand from your company's perspective, and sir, from Deloitte's perspective, right? How do companies actually plan on reporting and actually talking about their suppliers' performance? And does that mean that they're going to talk about it in an aggregated manner? And is it the total performance of their suppliers, or are they actually attributing some portion that they are liable for based on their purchases from the supplier?
Okay, so it's a very structured approach. It begins with supplier risk assessment on the BRSR core elements. Out of the 9 principles, there are 5 principles from which the BRSR core has been carved out. So you do the supplier risk assessment, then you apply the 80-20 principle because 75% of supply chain is required to be included. You build their capacity, you prepare them for disclosures on all those aspects, and that is only required to be limited assured, not reasonable assured. The respondent, which is the listed company that is required to provide a further disclosure, will consolidate these 75% or the boundary that has been defined in the BRSR for the disclosures, and that is required to be applied with a reasonable assurance lens. So that's the standard process. You will see the first set of supply chain included disclosures in the year that will end on 31st of March 2025, not in the year which is ending on 31st of March 2024. Let me just give the mic to this. And this will be the last.
Good evening. I am Kalp Bhatt from Tolakia Foundation. So, sir, I represent Saurashtra region in Gujarat and a specific village called Dudhala in the Amreli district. So, we have created some 140 lakes and joined them and created a 30-kilometer river. So, because the Honorable PM suggested us that, this is a dry land, so if you can work on the water aspect, that would be great. So after we did that, we received a Padma Shri. The United Nations accredited us with a water SDG thing. Now the water issue is sorted, but as all of you rightly mentioned, there is still need for literacy, for the correct education. So there are some 400 villages over there that needs the correct kind of business narrative for creating a better community. So I'm just looking for the correct partnerships and guidance on how we can do that, because all of you are experts in your field. There would be some 30,000 people that can benefit from this. So there's not a question, but just looking for some insights.
I'm not competent to provide you with a response because I am on the other side of the fence. Rather, I am looking at business with the clients. But yeah, can we close the session now? We are at the end.
Last question.
No, we'll probably,
I
we'll be
leave it on
around.
to the organizers.
I was
We can
given the
take
mic
one-
before you gave the mic to him. So
Yeah, we can take one more question.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Ramesh Gandhi, and I'm from social marketing domain. And my question pertains to the carbon points being generated by tobacco and related products. There are 280 million tobacco users in India. 60% of them use non-smoking tobacco products, that is gutka, jarda, pan masala. 40% smoking. Every day, more than 4,000 people are dying.
Sir, can you
because of it.
please?
Yes, I'm coming to
Please
this.
come to the question. We all are aware of what is happening with
Okay,
tobacco.
the tons of hazardous smoke which goes in the environment creates carbon points. At the same time, tons of waste which is not recyclable goes on the earth, and it is not cleaned. So, what is the mechanism which can be built up for creating carbon points and penalties to the tobacco manufacturers? Thank you.
I believe this would be the right question for regulatory agencies and not for people, those who are into delivering solutions. Can we take an exception as the last question from her?
Thank you so much. I'm Deepthi, and I work with the troubled youth and women to reinstate them back into the society by making them trauma-free and self-reliant. My question is with regards to the ESG, and maybe anyone, if you can lean on it. What are the gaps and challenges that you see in the for ESG implementation in India? And what are the kind of solutions that you would like to see in the marketplace, be it partnerships or NGOs that can help address those gaps?
Can I take that question? Yeah. So, thank you so much for this question. How many of you in this hall know that India as a country has a net zero goal? net zero goal, carbon neutrality. India has published in COP26 that by 2070 will be carbon neutral. So when India as a government, when Prime Minister G go and announce it, right, does he bank on corporates or he's banking on the whole nation? It's the whole nation. So ESG is not some framework that the regulatory body has to do, some corporates has to do. According to me, ESG is every individual's responsibility. How many of us in this room wear a leather belt? How many of us have used to come to this first floor or go to the lunch elevator? How many of you used elevator? How many of us used stairs? Fantastic. You're contributing. Thank you so much. So all of us have a role to play and all of us have responsibility to pay. Let us all try to contribute towards this country and achieve the 2070 goal. And not just for India, right? It's for the globe, for the rest of the generation. So thank you so much once again for the opportunity and looking forward to meeting you.